Adolf Hitler and Alfred Rosenberg. Adolf Hitler was the main force behind Nazism, turning it into a full-blown political movement. After fighting in World War I, he joined the German Workers' Party in 1919 and later turned it into the Nazi Party. In 1923, he tried to overthrow the government in the Beer Hall Putsch, but it failed and he ended up in prison. While locked up, he wrote Mein Kampf, where he laid out his vision for a strong nationalist Germany. By 1933, he had worked his way up to chancellor, and within a year, he took total control, turning Germany into a one-party dictatorship. His rule focused on military expansion, extreme nationalism, and shutting down communism and democracy. While Hitler was the public face of Nazism, Alfred Rosenberg helped shape its core beliefs. A writer and political theorist, Rosenberg pushed Nazi ideas about nationalism, culture, and state power. He believed in a strong, united Germany and rejected anything he thought weakened national identity. As the Nazi Party's main ideologue, he wrote The Myth of the 20th Century, which outlined many of the movement's key principles. Johann Gottfried Herder and Giuseppe Mazzini. Johann Gottfried Herder was one of the first big thinkers behind nationalism. A German philosopher in the late 1700s, he believed that every nation had its own unique culture, language, and history that made it special. He didn't think people should be ruled by kings just because of tradition or royal bloodlines. He argued that a nation should be built around a shared identity instead. While Herder came up with the theory, Giuseppe Mazzini was the one who put nationalism into action. A 19th century Italian revolutionary, Mazzini believed that nations should be unified, independent, and ruled by their own people, not by foreign powers. He started Young Italy, a secret group that pushed for Italian unification and fought against outside control. Mazzini's vision helped inspire nationalist leaders like Garibaldi in Italy and Bismarck in Germany. What started as a revolutionary idea became one of the most powerful forces in modern history, leading to new countries, independence wars, and even major conflicts like World War I. Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Adam Smith is basically the guy who came up with the big ideas behind capitalism. A Scottish economist and philosopher, he wrote The Wealth of Nations, where he explained how a free market economy works. He believed economies function best when people are free to trade and compete without too much government interference. His famous idea, the invisible hand, describes how people looking out for themselves can actually help society as a whole without even meaning to. David Ricardo took Smith's ideas and built on them. An English economist, he came up with the idea of comparative advantage, which explains why countries should focus on making what they're best at and trade for everything else. This became the foundation of global trade and free markets. He also wrote about wages, profits, and why too much government interference can mess up an economy, arguing that markets naturally balance themselves through supply and demand. Benito Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile. Mussolini started out as a socialist journalist, but over time, he ditched socialism for nationalism and militarism. After World War I, in 1919, he put together a paramilitary group called the Fasci di Combattimento, which later became the National Fascist Party. By 1922, he pulled off the March on Rome, pressuring King Victor Emmanuel III to make him prime minister. Once in power, he wasted no time getting rid of democracy and turning Italy into a one-party dictatorship. Under his rule, Italy became aggressive, forming an alliance with Germany and jumping into World War II. While Mussolini was the face of fascism, Giovanni Gentile was its brains. A philosopher and educator, Gentile came up with actual idealism, which argued that the state is everything. People only mattered if they contributed to it. He saw democracy as weak and divisive, believing a strong, united nation was more important. He worked closely with Mussolini, even co-writing the doctrine of fascism. Mussolini's rule ended badly. He was captured and executed in 1945 by Italian fighters. Gentile didn't last much longer. He was assassinated in 1944 for backing Mussolini's government. John Locke and Adam Smith. John Locke was one of the first big thinkers behind liberalism, shaping ideas about individual rights, limited government, and democracy. Back in the 1600s, when England was going through political chaos, Locke argued that governments should protect people's life, liberty, and property, not rule over them like kings. In his famous book, Two Treatises of Government, he rejected the idea that kings had some God-given right to rule. Instead, he pushed the idea that governments should only exist with the people's consent. While Locke focused on politics, Adam Smith shaped liberalism's economic side. A Scottish economist, Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, where he argued that the government should stay out of the economy as much as possible. He introduced the idea of the invisible hand, the belief that if people freely pursue their own interests in a market system, the economy will thrive naturally. Edmund Burke and Joseph de Maistre. Edmund Burke is often called the father of modern conservatism. He wasn't totally against change, but he thought it should be slow and respectful of tradition. In 1790, during the French Revolution, he wrote reflections on the revolution in France, criticizing revolutionaries for tearing things down too fast. He believed that society should evolve naturally, keeping what works and learning from the past instead of throwing everything out. While Burke believed in gradual reform, Joseph de Maistre took a harder stance. Writing in the early 1800s, he was all about strong rulers, traditional monarchy, and religious authority. After seeing the chaos of the French Revolution, he argued that revolution and democracy were dangerous and that only a powerful leader, backed by religion, could keep order. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were the brains behind socialism and communism. Marx, a German philosopher and economist, spent his life studying history, economics, and class struggles. Engels, the son of a wealthy factory owner, not only backed Marx financially, but also helped develop their ideas. In 1848, they co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, arguing that history is basically a fight between classes, the rich business owners and the working class. They saw capitalism as unfair and exploitative, believing that one day workers would rise up, overthrow it, and create a classless society where wealth and resources were shared. Marx later wrote Das Kapital, a deep dive into how capitalism worked and why he thought it would eventually collapse. Engels also contributed, writing The Condition of the Working Class in England and editing Marx's later works after he died. Their ideas influenced socialist and communist movements worldwide, including the Russian Revolution of 1917, which led to the creation of the Soviet Union. Giovanni Gentile and Hannah Arendt. Totalitarianism wasn't invented by one person, but Giovanni Gentile and Hannah Arendt played a huge role in shaping how we understand it. Giovanni Gentile was an Italian philosopher and one of the main intellectuals behind fascism. He believed the state should have total control over everything: politics, the economy, culture, and even personal beliefs. To him, people only mattered if they served the state. On the other side, Hannah Arendt studied totalitarianism after it had already taken over countries. In 1951, she wrote The Origins of Totalitarianism, looking at how regimes like Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union used propaganda, fear, and mass control to dominate society. Unlike Gentile, she didn't support totalitarianism. She exposed how dangerous it was